Welcome to my summer house. Isn't it lovely? It's an amazing roof, and it's only just been done the last few months. I want to show you another of my collections of my treasures. They're not valuable as such, but they're absolutely fascinating. When I left the full-time staff of the Sunday Times in the 1970s, I was clear out my desk and I found I had letters from 3 different prime ministers. One was Harold Macmillan, one was Harold Wilson, and the other one was Anthony Eden. And I'd interviewed them at various times and got letters from them. So I came home, I thought, I'm not chucking those out. And then I thought, I know, I will try to get an autograph letter or an autograph of every British Prime Minister from the beginning to the present times. And that means getting, the first Prime Minister was Sir Robert Walpole, who's actually called the First Minister, but he was agreed by historians as the first time we had a British Prime Minister. This was in the 1770s. And it took me 10 years to collect the autographs of every British Prime Minister. And I'll just take you through a few of them now. The one I mentioned at the beginning, the Harold Wilson one, that is actually fascinating. I'm not sure if you can see it, but after I finish talking, I'll do some cutaways. That's a technical term you won't understand. This is, Harold Wilson sent me a letter saying, "Dear Mr. Davies, many thanks for your letter, blah, blah, blah. I greatly enjoyed meeting you. Frankly, I do not remember." We must have, during the interview, talked about football, and he started boasting about his love for Huddersfield Town, which is where he came from. "Frankly, I do not remember the incident referred to, as I was only 6 at the time, and I started following Huddersfield Town a little later on. I often, however, heard legends of the Preston North End Cup final, and it was perhaps ironic justice that Preston beat Huddersfield also with a penalty in the last minute of extra time in the last cup final before the war. Again, many thanks for writing." So he's dictated that letter, presumably to Marcia, who was his secretary. He signed it, and at the bottom, he's obviously read it through, and in handwriting, he's put an asterisk and he's inserted, "after hitting the crossbar." This is a penalty in the last minute. And the point about this is that Harold Wilson had a most amazing memory, and secondly, he was a terrible show-off about information. So that's a nice letter, it's an insight into his character. And it's also, of course, a sad letter, because in the end, Harold Wilson, with his brilliant memory, got dementia and forgot everything. So that's one of my treasured letters. So I went back to the beginning, and I managed to get a letter. It's actually not a letter, it's a signed document from Robert Walpole. And this, he signed it in I can't see his name now. He signed it in 1725, and it's on a document with other people's names, so you can see it at the bottom, Walpole. So I've got Henry Pelham, Duke of Newcastle. I've got Grafton, Earl of Bute, William Pitt the younger, William Pitt. I've got there was only one Prime Minister so far who's been assassinated. He was Spencer Perceval, was shot dead in the House of Commons on May the 11th, 1812 by John Bellingham. It was a rather deranged gentleman with a personal grievance against the government. So I've got his autograph on a piece of paper. I've got Canning. I've got Lord Grey, the Grey's Reform. I'm just telling you, I've got loads of Palmerston, lovely letter. I've got a passport signed by Palmerston. So that's volume 1. And volume 2, I've got Disraeli, lots by Disraeli. Melbourne, Gladstone, lots by Gladstone. Lord Salisbury, Balfour. Who's that by? Campbell Bannerman. Asquith. Lord George. Lord George is quite hard to get. Stanley Baldwin, Bonelaw, Neville Chamberlain, Ramsay MacDonald, Clement Attlee. I've got Churchill, Winston Churchill, 1945. Actually, the most valuable autograph of all the British Prime Ministers from 1770 to the present day, the really valuable one is Winston Churchill. And that's because he's a hero and a legend in America, so you get American autograph collectors collecting him. Whereas most British Prime Ministers are only of interest to British people. Whereas a really good autograph by Winston Churchill is worth thousands, I think. Mine is not very good. Anthony Eden, that's the one to me. Dear Mr. Davies, thanks. This is turning me down. Thank you for your letter suggesting an interview. I am grateful to you for this thought, to which I must reluctantly reply that I have long made it a practice not to grant interviews. This being so, I feel sure that you will understand that I cannot make an exception even for Atticus. Atticus was the Sunday Times column which I was writing at the time. Harold Wilson, Callahan, Edward Heath, Margaret Thatcher. Yum yum, look at that. A signed photograph of Margaret Thatcher. And I've got another signed letter from Margaret Thatcher. I've got John Major. I've got, who's that? From Downing Street. Is it Tony Blair? Tony Blair. Another Tony Blair. Gordon Brown, signed Gordon, how about that? And I've got David Cameron, and I've got Mrs. May, and I have got the one and only Boris Johnson. I did meet Boris many years ago, when he was editor of The Spectator. I did a review for them once. I got invited, so I did say hello to him, but he doesn't know me. And of course, we're all hoping he's going to live. We're all hoping he's going to get better. And we're all, I can see he's the sort of person that's probably the most appalling invalid. I can see him being totally restless and furious that he's had to lie still and furious being told what to do. He's gone through life ignoring people telling him what to do. So I'm sure he's in agony at the moment. Anyway, I wrote to him, I wrote to all the British Prime Ministers, the ones I've never met properly, and said, I'm a collector of British Prime Ministers. I've got every Prime Minister since Walpole in the 1770s, but I haven't got you. Please send it to me with a photograph. It usually, I know how the system works. There's a secretariat at 10 Downing Street, and some poor sod goes through these letters, and eventually they, if it's from children, they usually answer children and send a standardized letter. But I got a nice signed letter back from Boris Johnson. So that is all my collection of British Prime Ministers. Thank you.